Do you have to be a prophet in order to prophesy? This is a question I have had for so long because, I know that there are certain gifts in the Bible that people receive. And one of them is like a gift, to prophesy. But also there are there's the fivefold ministry, like there's a pastor, prophet, apostle, evangelist, and then I'm forgetting one. I'm forgetting one of them. And so I was kind of like, okay, then if you prophesy, that makes you a prophet. But once I went to ministry school, they said, no, you do not have to be a prophet in order to prophesy. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to another episode of the You, Me, and Jesus podcast. I am so excited that you're here today. And we are talking about the subject of, how can you prophesy if you're not a prophet? But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for watching and subscribing to us on YouTube and for listening to the podcast. It makes me so happy every single week when I'm seeing all of these different comments, when I'm seeing people subscribe to the channel, just all the things like, the podcast player shows me how many people downloaded episodes for the week. And every time I see like 2 people, 10 people, 100 people, I'm always just like 100 people listen to me talk about my relationship with God this week. That is phenomenal when I think about it. And so I'm so thankful that you guys are listening. And so also if you want to let me know how you're enjoying us on YouTube or on the podcast. If you're on YouTube, please comment and like and subscribe to the channel. And if you are on the podcast stations, then please write a review because I literally read all the reviews, like all of them. And they make me feel so happy. And it just reminds me that people care about what it is I have to say. I'm going to keep doing it because God asked me to do it, but hearing from you just makes it all, all worthwhile. So today we're talking about, do you have to be a prophet in order to prophesy? And I share, my experience of like, what were my thoughts about, do you have to be a prophet in order to prophesy, because of me going to school and all the things. And so I wanted to read you a scripture in the Bible that talks about this. And so let's kind of look at 1 Corinthians 14:31. Let's go with the New Living Translation. That's my favorite. In this way, all who prophesy will have a turn to speak, one after the other, so that everyone will learn and be encouraged. Now, the New International Version says, for all can prophesy in turn, so that everyone may be instructed and encouraged. For you can all prophesy. All right. All, that means everybody. And so when I think about that, when I first, heard them talk about it at church, I was like, so all can prophesy? And I was like, well, what does that even look like? How is that even possible? And one of the things for me in my background is I always thought that you had to be the prophet. I thought you had to be the pastor or whatever. I thought you had to be that very special person that is the one that can hear God and prophesy. But I started to learn something, as I got closer in my relationship with God, is that like, you don't have to be anyone special. You don't have to be the special person that they bring in town, that they give the mic to, you don't have to be that. You literally just had to have a relationship with God, because, the way that you are able to speak on behalf of somebody is because you know them, because they speak to you or whatever. It reminds me of like, have you ever had like a boyfriend or girlfriend and you dated them for quite a while, or you've been married and you have a husband or wife and you've been with them for quite a while, and you get a call from the school or from a doctor or from, you go to a fast food restaurant and your person isn't there, and you're having to like make a decision of what it is that you're going to order for your person. Well, because you know them so well, you better not order them a Pepsi when they want a Coke or a Diet Coke. You better not get ketchup when they want Chick-fil-A or Polynesian sauce from Chick-fil-A, because you know them, you can speak on their behalf. And so what I started to learn about being able to prophesy is that not just because I have a close relationship with God per se, but what happens, with having a relationship with God is that he begins to talk to you. You begin to like know him. You begin to know when he is saying a thing, when he wants to say a thing, when he wants to encourage a person and all that. I hope that makes sense. But what I started to learn is that with my relationship with God is that like the closer I'm having a relationship with him, the more I'm able to hear him. But also here's what that looks like when I think about it. So as it pertains to God. So if I'm in a room with a person, God is so kind. He loves me. He loves them. And sometimes he's trying to get a message to a person, whether it is me or it is to them, right? And one of the ways that he can get a message to a person is by giving it to a person that can give it to them. Now, he can speak to them very clearly, directly. Like recently, I was like getting very excited about potentially purchasing a house this summer, and I had a dream that was very clear that was just like, no, you're not ready, slow down, you're moving too fast. And that was very clear. I didn't need anybody, right? In that specific, instance or whatever. But sometimes, you're in an instance of something and God is actually like, hey, I'm going to actually speak to you to speak to them, or he's going to speak to them in order to speak to us. And so I have had that happen, before, where I am like, I remember one time I was married, I was in the kitchen with my ex-husband. I think we were in like an argument or something, or a disagreement, whatever it was. And all of a sudden I just heard the words, lose yourself. And I was like, what? And I'm thinking to myself, what? He said, lose yourself. And so I said it, lose yourself. You need to lose yourself. And my ex-husband was just like, he was in shock. He was very like stunned and like, like there's a sound on TikTok and the woman was too stunned to speak. And so he was like,
the woman was too stunned to speak.
Just kind of like frozen. And then I repeated it, lose yourself, lose yourself, lose yourself in him. And he was just so shook, right? And like, I didn't really know it. But what I realized later was that was something that God had said to him. And that when I said it, he knew that God was speaking directly to him in a thing. Now, I'm not sure all the details of what that meant, because very shortly after that was when we went through divorce or whatever. But I didn't know that, that's specifically what was happening. But there was a message God was trying to get to him, and he used me to get it to him. And so when I think about the fact that all can prophesy, is that you don't have to be a prophet. Like, prophet is an office. Like, a pastor is a pastor, right? But we can all minister to people. We can all just love on people and share the love of Jesus with people. We can do all these things with God and with people, and then we can draw them into church. And then the pastor is leading the church, but the pastor isn't leading the whole world. We're in the world, right? And so what I have learned and am learning about, prophesying and versus prophet is that God is like, listen, I will speak to anyone and everyone. I will speak to a rock, because the Bible talks about the rocks will cry out. If you won't cry out, the rocks will cry out. And so he will speak to us very specifically to get a message to people, just like he will speak to people to get messages to us. But the thing about it is that if you are going to be one of those people that God uses to prophesy, is that you have to have a relationship with him, because it's very hard to hear someone or to be able to differentiate between what is you and what is God if you don't spend time with him. For example, about the whole thing with the house, I knew that was him because I had just come home from a showing and all the type of stuff. And I said, I'm going to ask God tomorrow about buying a house, this summer. And so I said it, but I didn't intentionally like go to get it that night when I went to sleep, but I said it. And when I had the dream and I woke up, I knew that the dream was not from me. I knew I didn't give myself that dream, because there were certain things that was happening in the dream. And I was just like, I know this dream very well. I know this and this, and there, something's going on here. And when I asked him, like, what are you trying to say to me? And he was just like, yeah, I'm trying to tell you to slow down, that it's not time to purchase this house or whatever. Right. Also, there have been times where, I wanted to date someone or whatever, and someone has come along. Okay. I'll give you an example. So when I was going to get married, I didn't know what was happening at the time, but he gave a friend of mine, Mimi, who was working with me. She had this dream that him and I eloped. And I was like, well, we eloped. Now, that's very exciting. Why would we get in a dream that we eloped? And so he gave her the dream and not me. So then I brought the dream to somebody and I was just like, well, what do you think this dream means? She goes, well, eloping is when you're trying to escape something. It's like when you're like, you don't want to be bothered with all the hubbub and all the things. And so instead of you planning this elaborate wedding, you just go and elope and get married without anybody, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But in our instance, elopement was like my ex-husband was trying to escape something. He wasn't actually dealing with his present circumstance or whatever was going on with him. And he just wanted to get married and like let everything be taken care of. But that obviously was not helpful. But I didn't understand that. So God was using Mimi in her dream to try to speak to us. Once I decided to divorce him, a bunch of people came to me and was just like, yeah, God had talked to me about you with this and this and this. And I'm like, why did none of y'all tell me while we were dating? And everybody was like, they didn't know. And so, but these weren't prophets. These were people that had relationships with him and that he was speaking to. So the short answer is this, that you don't don't have to be a prophet. You don't have to be a prophet in order to prophesy. You just need to have a relationship with God and be open to hearing him and speaking on his behalf when he speaks with you. And it has been the most, I would say, rewarding experience to be able to hear God and like tell somebody like, I feel like this is what God wants you to know right now. And when you say it to them and you watch them cry or you watch them get excited or you just watch them have this like moment that you don't even know what it's about because you didn't even really understand the thing that God was saying to you. But when you said it to them, it changed their lives. I strongly encourage you that if you have not gone on a journey of getting closer to God and said, God, I want to hear your voice. Help me to hear your voice for myself, for my family members, my friends, my business cohorts, or whatever. Go on that journey of asking him that, and you are going to be amazed at what happens. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode. I hope it has encouraged you. So if you love the You, Me, and Jesus podcast, make sure you go to all the podcast players so you can listen to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play.